So going micro in into the lean startup world, what's the importance of having a minimum viable product, MVP, and pivoting?
So the minimum viable product is it's really all about having a testing culture. So instead of believing what's between your ears, that understand everything about the product and all you got to do is build it and put it out there and customers will come running in droves. The idea is to say, no, I need to validate what's in my idea. I need to think about my business model in terms of hypotheses and then come up with experiments that I can do in order to test those hypotheses. And so while minimum viable product is sort of this minimum number of features necessary for a customer to actually solve their problem to such a degree that they'd be willing to buy your product. That's the minimum viable product. And entrepreneurs often get caught up in the minimum side of it without the viability part. The viability part is at least as important as the minimum part. And so that idea has sort of been expanded out in our book. Patrick and I talk about what we call the intermediate MVPs, and those are sort of along a path of trying to figure out if your business model is correct or what needs to change in your business model. There are things that you can test. And so a couple of my favorite examples are in the case study in the book on Sonic Mule. So S Mule had both technical risk and market risk. And so the old school option is to build your product out far enough that you can test technical risk and you can test the market risk. And who knows, in order to get to that, maybe you have to build the whole product. And that's going to take you 6 months and it's a year and you release it. And then what if the technical part doesn't work? Or what if the market assumptions are wrong? You've just wasted your year, right? So what Sonic Mule did, which I thought was ingenious, and which hopefully inspires creativity in your audience, is they said, well, no, we're not going to build out our core product. We're actually going to release these mini products that actually test what's risky in our business model. So for the technical risk, they needed to know what the latency was of music that comes out of their iPad, and then it's going to come back in on the speakers and through to the microphones, and then and so they needed to measure that latency. So what they did is they built a tiny little app, just a fun little app. They released it to their customers. And the customers played with it. The product was instrumented in a way that they could actually measure the latency. And then with the market risk, what they wanted to know is, would people bump their iPhones together in order to exchange music that they had created? Well, so instead of building out their main product to that point, they built a little lighter, put it on the iPhone, and they bumped they released it to their customers. Customers would bump their phone together, and the flame from the lighter would go from one iPhone to another. And again, they instrumented that product, so they had a dashboard, and they could sit there and watch the flames, spread across the world. So not only did they validate their assumptions, but and mitigated those risks, but they actually also learned how to instrument their product so that they could test things like, what is engagement with my product and how can I improve that engagement over time. So I thought those were a couple of brilliant examples.
Are these guys doing well? I used to drive by there, and it just have an unconventional business model. How are they doing?
Well, I actually haven't talked to them in a while, but back when I was writing the book, they were actually blowing up, and so I actually think their instruments are pretty clever and are doing well, and they had sold quite a bit. And unlike a lot of apps, they actually charge for their apps out of the gate, which I think is kind of nice because you're at least, again, you're testing your revenue models right from the get-go rather than giving away apps and then trying to figure out how you're going to monetize that later. So Jeff Smith is the CEO, and I think he's just a brilliant CEO, and he's a classically trained musician as well. So I love the fact that he's working on something that he's passionate about.